In this video, EM thinks that her religion dictates my lifestyle. Impatient Karen loses her job. And short me $70,000 in violation of our written agreement? It'll cost you $1.8 million. EM thinks that her religion dictates my lifestyle. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for 3.5 years. His parents have been entitled throughout this entire time, and 100% of this entitlement stems from the idea that if I do not follow their religion, then I'm not respecting the religion. For example, when I was first introduced to EM, this was in a restaurant, she asked me why I'd ordered a salad. I explained that I was vegetarian, and that was one of the few vegetarian options at this restaurant. She told me that not eating meat is haram. I know this is false. I have several relatives, in fact, everyone in my family except my parents and brother are Muslim. And in fact, the dish she got was haram, regular, not halal, steak. I just changed the topic and hoped that would be it. Of course it wasn't. Every time I visit their house, she goes out of her way to ensure all of her dishes contain meat, even the ones that don't traditionally contain meat. Meanwhile, she accuses me of being disrespectful because I'm not eating her cooking. After a few months of this, she decides that because premarital relationships are against her religion, I have to get married. I completely failed to see how these two things are connected, but she started applying a lot of pressure on this. My mom, also not a Muslim, but an expert negotiator, suggests that we instead do a Quran reading ceremony with the extended family present. Apparently this was acceptable to her, so we rounded up the extended family on both sides and watched my boyfriend's grandma, the oldest person in either family, read a verse of the Quran. I didn't consider this a marriage, but if it gets EM off my back, then great. EM becomes tolerable for a while, and I learned to just bring my own food if I ever come over, which is rare, so things quiet down for a while, at least from my end. My boyfriend, who still lives with them, still has a curfew of 9 p.m. No alcohol or weed allowed in the house. Weed is legal where we live, etc., despite being 22 years old at this point. In the middle of all this, I get accepted to medical school, which means leaving the city for another city approximately 2 hours away. I wasn't looking forward to being long distance, but at least I don't have to deal with EM anymore. EM considers being long distance to be the same thing as being broken up, apparently, and starts bringing over girls for my boyfriend to consider marrying. He tells all the girls that he's already seeing someone, obviously, and it causes an argument with his mom every time it happens. One time, EM brings him a 16-year-old. I have no idea what she intended with that. If my boyfriend was 22, wouldn't any relationship they had be statutory rape? Anyways, at this point, COVID hits, and he's no longer required to live in that city for school, so he immediately moves in with me. EM goes full insane. If dating while not married is haram, can you imagine how bad living together while not married is? EM gets the dad involved at this point. He's just as religious, but he has to work more than full time. EM doesn't work, and is usually too tired to start anything. However, for this, he will make an exception. They demand to meet us in person. Despite COVID and the whole religion being in lockdown, in a moment of profound stupidity, we for some reason agreed to this. Don't ask me what brought on this massive brain fart. Maybe I just used up all my brain cells on the most recent exam or something. So anyways, we meet with them in person, and ED, entitled Dad, goes on about how ashamed he is when he has to explain that his son is living with his girlfriend that he's not married to. EM starts crying and explaining that no amount of praying can save us from the depths of hell we've gotten ourselves into. She chooses this time to give a graphic description of exactly how painful hell will be for us, which she quite seems to enjoy. At the end of this, they ask when we'll be getting married. Whenever we want to, I say. EM goes on and on about how rude and disrespectful I'm being, and how I apparently managed to corrupt her previously devout son away from God, etc., etc. This was about a year ago. EM is trying to make everything about us getting married. Trying to be polite, we invite them over for lunch during a break in the lockdowns. They say not until we're married. I overhear during a phone call this EM has some questions about the COVID vaccine, and, being a medical student, I volunteer to help answer some questions she might have. Not until we get married. I invite my boyfriend's sisters, age 20 and 23, but they still live with the parents, to go on a camping trip, but EM says she won't let them go until we get married. I should mention that prior to this, I'd never seen a Muslim abuse their religion this way. I get along with my extended family who are quite religious, mostly because they understand that their religion is something about them, not something about me. Impatient Karen loses her job. For those not in the know, a mysterious shopper is a person assigned by the company to make random unannounced inspections with regards to customer service and in general the well-being of the company employees and the store. Also, it's customary for the mystery shopper to blend in with everyday customers and not bring attention to themselves in a way that can be misconstrued as just another obnoxious and rude customer, i.e., act like a douche, get treated like a douche. This woman didn't get that memo. One day, around lunchtime, my boss was in the back having her lunch. I was out on the shop floor and serving customers, an unusually high amount, but nothing that I couldn't handle on my own since my coworker wasn't going to be in later, when in walks this Karen. As I was serving the queue of customers, I half-heartedly said, "Hi, welcome to..." I was hungry, while still serving and ringing through items. "K, mm-hmm," and under her breath, "It's polite to make eye contact." Alarm bells. She hums and haws while I'm making my way cautiously and correctly through the remaining customers, all the while she's making daggers, and eventually storms off in a huff, looking around. Like I can come away from paying customers just to help her. As the last two customers make their way to the till, she joins the queue with a whole two items with an audible, "Oh, for fuck's sakes." The customer I'm serving looks at me with a "what the fuck" expression and I nod. Not even 1 minute in, K. "This is fucking ridiculous." Finalizing the payment before moving on to the next customer, the till decides to freeze, and it takes a few minutes for it to reboot. I make my apologies, and the customer I'm serving is fine with it along with the customer behind. Louder, K. "Oh, for fuck's sakes! The service in this establishment," she was posh, "is absolutely fucking ridiculous." I had enough. With my best but pissed off customer service voice and smile, I said, "Listen. As you can clearly see, I'm dealing with other customers. I'm the only staff member on the floor as my boss is at lunch. The till has decided to not play nice, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm well within my rights to refuse you service and ask you to leave as your attitude absolutely stinks." K. "What? You can't talk to me that way. Don't you know who I am?" Me. "I really don't care, to be honest. Now, I'm once again asking you to leave." She storms off in the foulest mood you ever did see. The customer I'm serving says, "Thank Christ you said something." I was ready to smack her. We both laugh and I finish both services and thank them for their patience. They both worked in another store where we were based. My boss has finally finished her lunch at this point and has come through the front. Boss. "Oh, I meant to say there's gonna be a mystery shopper at some point. Don't know who, but please be on your best behavior." Oh, fuck. I quickly tell her what happened and explain that I was busy, but not too busy that I needed to involve her in the conversations as it happened. And lo and behold, just as I'm finished telling her, in walks the regional manager, RM, for the company. "RM, OP, back office, now." I'm dead. Now, knowing that the RM has a tendency to be a hothead in these situations, I was shitting bricks at this point. Thankfully, I've had a reasonably good working relationship with him up until this point, so it really could go any way. RM, unusually calm. "What happened?" I explain everything, from the moment she entered to the moment she stormed off, almost taking the door with her, and the fact that I had witnesses that worked in the immediate vicinity, the full shebang. RM, sighs, nods. I'm finally glad that someone else has the balls to stand up to my wife. "What?" The look on my face said it all, and he starts to laugh. "RM, please, accept my apologies, and I'll let B know that there's not to be any repercussions for this, and I think it's time to let my wife know it's time to find more suitable employment." Me, speechless, mutters, Thanks." He hands me a 20-pound gift card for the mall's cafe and said lunch was on him. The best coffee and chicken/bacon club sandwich I ever had. Short me $70,000 in violation of our written agreement? It'll cost you $1.8 million. A year out of school in the early 1990s, I procured a job as a business analyst for a large family-owned tech company. This business was located in the booming heart of technology at the time and was very profitable. As tech took off over the next decade, the company thrived and remained family-owned. What was a rich family and company became exceedingly wealthy with a valuation/net worth in the high 9 to low 10 figures. The family that owned it was quite neurotic, very moody, and had a reputation as being very ruthless, greedy when it came to financing, deal making, employees, etc. I truly believe this is what held them back from ultimately becoming a household name as a company. As I progressed in the company, I gained more and more face time with the owners. I worked on some projects directly with ownership that really paid off and gained me even greater access to their inner circle. Now, like a lot of people at the time, and particularly those who worked in tech, I was heavily invested in tech stocks. I discussed some of my investments and gains with ownership as casual conversation, though investing had nothing to do with my role in the company. That is until one day in late 1999 when the owner came to me and asked me if I would invest some of his personal money. He wanted me to take big risks to see if they would pay off using $1 million of his personal money. I was a bit hesitant, but still being in my late 20s and wanting to prove myself, I said I would. I asked for a written agreement where they acknowledged this wasn't my role in the company, was a personal matter between the owner and me, and to document my compensation for this side arrangement, 20% of all profits. Around this time, and by working in the industry, I started to notice the weakness associated with a lot of tech companies. They just weren't living up to their hype and stock price, and some seemed like they were starting to run out of money. I had no inside information, just a strong sense of which companies were struggling based on my work in the business. Based on this sense, I started using both my money and the owner's money to short tech companies just after the new year in 2000. For anyone unfamiliar with shorting, it means if the value of a stock decreases, the value of the investment increases. I had a few long positions, but my overall position was very short. Since the owner wanted big risk and big reward, I used his money and obtained leverage or margin from the financial institution where I maintained both his and my trading accounts. The accounts were separate, but both under my name. Again, I documented this and gained consent. Well, both my account and his suffered some moderate losses in the first 2 months of 2000 before the bubble began to burst and both accounts, but his in particular, began to skyrocket. Ownership's pettiness. In June, the company began to suffer a downturn. We were still profitable, but since we provided tech services and products, we were not immune to weakness in the broader market. I had not informed the owner of my short strategy. He came to me one day and asked how his money was doing, saying he suspected it was way down like the general market. To his surprise, I informed him that while we still had some money tied up in options, puts, and shorts, but based on the positions I had closed, there was $1.35 million in cash sitting in the account that belonged to him. Again, I still had a bunch of open positions which, if memory serves, were worth about $1 million on that date, but the positions I had closed had yielded $1.35 million in cash just sitting in his account, which was in my name. The owner, either through ignorance or lack of attention, said, "Great, $1.35 million? Fantastic work in this down market. Will you please wire it to me?" I responded that I would, but would be taking my 20% off the $350,000 profit or $70,000 before wiring him the $280,000. I also reminded him I still had open positions that had yet to pay off or close, but I didn't state the amount. He, once again, appeared not to understand or comprehend the open position statement, but instead totally focused on and became incensed about my rightful claim for $70,000. He went on and on about how times were tough. I should be grateful for a job, particularly at my young age, and the entire $350,000 was necessary for him and the company. I knew this wasn't true based on my position within the company. Worse, this was my first time personally experiencing the greedy and corrupt nature that served as the basis for ownership's reputation. The revenge. Now comes the revenge. Since, after 2 separate occasions, the owner didn't seem to grasp that the open positions would yield at least some income and thus additional profit, I decided not to mention it again. I sent him back the entire $1.35 million and continued to manage the open positions to the best of my ability. And here's the kicker, the owner never brought it up again. He seemed to think the $1.35 million payment was the entire value of the account and never understood or remembered that open positions still existed. He never asked for records, tax documents, or any kind of audit or financials. Given the fact that he was dishonest with me, I didn't feel the need to disabuse him of that notion. Ultimately, after a bit more net gain, I covered all of the shorts and exercised all of the options, puts in this case, for an additional $1.8 million. I worked for the company for 3 more years, and owner never asked about it during my tenure. After I gave notice, or since, I know it's a bit crass and even shady as fuck, but given his dishonesty with me over the $70,000, I felt justified in keeping the additional $1.8 million. I paid taxes on the gain, long-term cap gain, and went on my way with a fantastic nest egg. Nobody has asked about it since, and I've only told the story to a few people. The final ironic cherry on top of this sundae is that during my remaining 3 years, I gained greater influence with ownership and position with the company because they considered me loyal for giving the $1.35 million back and not making too much of a stink about the $70,000 profit. Little did they know I got the better of them. The company eventually folded due to family disputes, but my understanding is that ownership walked away in a very good financial position. They likely could have been a much better and greater company had they not practiced the same dishonesty that they showed me with their vendors, clients, and employees.